John Brown's Raid and Both Sides Weighed. I am, as always, your host, Christopher Paul Dugdale, MEDMA. We are Duncanville High School in these United States. And today is November 30th, 2020. And on this date in history, in 1991, I rolled my car. Okay? So I was coming home. I was at my girlfriend Dana's house, and I had to be home by midnight. And I was 10 minutes away, but it was 11:55 whenever I left. So I went 45 miles an hour to get to Dana's house. So I'm really good at math. So if it takes me, 10 minutes to go 45 miles an hour, then to get there in what, 5 minutes, and I had to go at least 90. It was raining really hard, and then I also had to take home Lacey. No, not Lacey. What was her? Kendra. Kendra's boyfriend also that night. And so we race in the car, we're driving, and he tells me where his turn is right at the last second. So I slam on the brakes because I used to be able to do that on my go kart. And whenever I did, we went into a flat spin and the car hit the ditch and it flipped over. Okay. So there, Bryson and I were sitting in the seat and we're looking forward out the front window, and it's like, oh crap. And so we looked at each other and we smiled, and we're upside down being held to the seats because we were buckled up. And then we realized on TV, every time a car flips, it explodes. So we go and I was like, the car's gonna explode. And so, we both unbuckled. We hit the ceiling of the car, and then we go and we unroll the window, and we're there, kind of hiking and fighting our way through. Army crawling through the mud because it's just pouring down rain, and water's starting to flood in the car as we go, and we're all covered with mud on our faces, and we go and we jump in the ditch across the street, and the other. We almost got hit by a car, and the other car was like, "Oh, what are you idiots doing?" We were like, "Get out of here, the car's going to explode." And he was like, "No, the car's not going to explode." And it didn't. So, anyway, that was the fourth day I was driving. That's why your parents worry. Happy car flip day. So now we go back to John Brown. When we last left John Brown, he was in Kansas uh, butchering men in front of their families as he freed slaves. Now John Brown, it's been about 2 years. He's been 2.5 years. He's been kind of the public's uh, out of the public sphere, and he decides he's going to go and start a slave rebellion in Virginia, and he's hoping that his actions will inspire a mass rebellion that will free all of the slaves there. And so John Brown goes in and seizes the massive weapons depot at Harper's Ferry, Virginia, and he frees and arms several slaves. Uh, the U.S. government, though, is going to send Colonel Robert E. Lee, and the Marines against him. The rebellion's a short one. Brown is captured and he's sentenced to death, and he's executed. He becomes a martyr for the abolition movement. Southerners saw this as much more. They saw this as a plot by Northerners to kill slaveholders. And this is going to be one of the things that really cements people in the election of 1860, one way or the other. So, John Brown and his attempt at at changing all this. Well, uh, if you're interested in watching a movie on him, there's one that's starring Ethan Hawke, and it's being done by HBO. I haven't had a chance to watch it, but I've heard it's pretty good. So, I know whenever you think of Lincoln, you think, wow, that dude had a really, really easy life. You know, never faced any hardships. Okay? Well, hardships were the only kind of boats that Lincoln ever got to go on. When all he wanted was friendship. But that boat, alas, did not sell for him. So let's go back. Lincoln was born in 1809. At the age of 10 years old, his mother violently died in her sleep. I believe it was a variant of the flu. Okay? So, whenever he was 23 years old, he loses his job, tries to run for the state legislature, and loses. 24, he starts his own business, and it fails. 26, the love of his life, the woman who would have brought him joy and maybe made it difficult for him to understand the plight of other people, she died, leading to his nervous breakdown the next year. Now, I didn't mention in 1834 he does get elected to the state legislature. So he tries to run for the state speaker of the House. He's only 29 years old, but why not? And he gets defeated. So he still has his position in the House. Tries to run for Congress in 1843 and doesn't win the nomination. Finally wins the nomination in 1845. 1846 he's elected. And while he's in Congress, he asks Polk where on a map that American blood had been spilled, and gets laughed out of the out of Congress. This poor Whig congressman, and he loses the nomination for the House of Representatives. So he made it to the House, then he loses it. Goes home, can't even get a job as a land officer. 6 years, gets himself back together, tries to run for the U.S. Senate, and is defeated. 1856, the Whig Party is in tatters. He helped start a new political party called the Republican Party. Since he's the founder of the party, tries to get nomination for vice president. Not president, but vice president. And he's defeated. And then in 1858, tries to run for the U.S. Senate again, has the famous Stephen Douglas, Abraham Lincoln debates, and loses once again. So this will bring us to whenever all of his problems are solved and his life gets easy, the election of 1860. In the election of 1860, you have John C. Breckinridge. He runs for the Southern Democrats, and his plan is to extend slavery and annex Cuba. Okay. The bottom left-hand side, you see Stephen Douglas, a portly man. Man, dude's got no neck. Huh. Someone shaped like me can run for president. What a sad thing. Okay, so Stephen Douglas runs for the Northern Democrats, and if you remember from the last episode of Notes, he believed in popular sovereignty and saw that as his ticket to get elected. Now, the big problem here is you see a candidate for Southern Democrats and for Northern Democrats. And this is a split vote, and this is never good when you're running for president to split a political party's votes. On the right side, the very friendly-looking man there is John Bell, and John Bell ran for the Know Nothing or American Party. This is a political party that hated immigrants, especially Catholic immigrants, and didn't want them to have any jobs and did not want them to stay in the country. So I know he looks kind and lovable and huggable, but you need to be careful when going near him. He does bite. Abraham Lincoln, we've talked about him before, but he runs for the Republican Party. And he is fighting against the expansion of slavery in the West. Okay? He's against John Brown's raid, and he wants to preserve slavery in the South. His idea and concept for defeating slavery is to keep it where it is and basically, just smother it out. Treat it like a disease and don't allow it to spread. Okay? What did he want to do with former slaves? He wanted to send them to Africa. So the Civil War and contact with a lot of different civil rights groups is really going to change Lincoln and change his beliefs on what should be done with former slaves. So it's kind of an important point to know that he was not always planning to be the great emancipator. His plan was to, end slavery, hopefully end slavery, but just limit it to where it was, and that would be the thing that really ended slavery in the end. Lincoln wins without being on a Southern ballot. So, in all of the states you see on the map on the left that are orange or blue, Lincoln was not even on those ballots, and yet he won. So this makes Southerners feel marginalized, and they're ready for something to happen. Okay, so while Lincoln ultimately will be the one who ends slavery, they were in no immediate danger. The basically the people in the Supreme Court all supported. Well, there was a majority of them that supported slavery, so that wasn't going to change. The Senate, there was still you know, there there was not a majority to overturn slavery in the Senate because the Democrats controlled the South and the Republicans controlled the North, so neither one of them had a majority. Slavery wasn't going anywhere, but they really felt threatened. So, as soon as the election results are counted and totaled, South Carolina decides to secede. An additional 7 states are going to leave the United States before Lincoln even took office. Now, there's 8 very important states that are on the border. Okay? That's Arkansas, Missouri, Kentucky, Tennessee, North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware. Okay? Now, if you're playing along at home looking at the map, you're going to go, wait a minute, what about the state of Indian Territory? Well, not actually a state. And then some people might go, what about Wavah? Well, Wavah is West Virginia, and West Virginia is actually not a state until 1862. So these states were very important because nearly half of the population of the South was in these states, these orange and purple states on the map. Okay, about half the population of the South was there, and about half of the factories in the South. Okay, so these border states were very important to who is going to win or lose the Civil War. Now, you've got a major problem with Washington, D.C. As you can see right here on this map on the right-hand side, it's kind of blurry, but it kind of does the whole point here. Okay, right there you will see Washington, D.C., and it is surrounded by Maryland, a slave state to the north, and Virginia, a slave state to the south. So, I don't know if you know much about war, but it's a bad idea to have your capital in another country. So, to protect Washington, D.C., Lincoln declared martial law or military rule in Maryland, and this would keep Washington, D.C. from being surrounded. Okay? So, it's not going to be in another country, it's going to be there. The problem is, does Lincoln have the right to do this? Okay? With a further controversy, he arrests people and suspends habeas corpus or basic rights. Okay? Habeas corpus, if you look at the words, corpus is, most of you have heard of Corpus Christi, right? The city. I'm going to pretend like, I'm talking to people, and some of you are nodding. Yeah, I've heard of Corpus Christi. That's that city down on the coast. It means body of Christ. So corpus means body. Habeas is having or belonging to. So having or belonging to the body or basic rights. Now, what this means is they can hold you without trial. So all of those things that are protected in the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, are no longer being protected. So Lincoln is really going around the Constitution, 1, by declaring martial law, and 2, by suspending everyone's basic rights. Okay? So, anyway, I know it might sound controversial, and many are like, I love Abraham Lincoln. You can love Abraham Lincoln, but just remember, if you allow one president to go through and, decide which laws to follow and which laws to not follow, that you set a dangerous precedent, and you make it so that all presidents after can do the same. And you might love whatever president's in office, but the next one could be a nightmare. So it's just really you have to be careful when doing these type of things, and Lincoln was heavily criticized for doing this. Some people he arrested and suspended rights for were in jail for 7 years without ever knowing what they were putting in jail for. The Confederate States of America. So eventually, 11 states would be members of the Confederacy. You have South Carolina, which is the big troublemaker and everything. North Carolina, Virginia, Tennessee, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas. Massive territory. Okay, each state guaranteed slavery and individual independence of each state. Okay, so they have kind of pushed their way back to the Articles of Confederation. They are not the United States of the Confederacy. They are basically 11 separate nations that are fighting together. Okay, Jefferson Davis becomes the president. If you remember, his dad was Zachary Taylor. He was the person that came up with the idea to get camels to go across the desert, which did not work as well for him as he wanted. Okay, was a West Point member, but that doesn't mean he's intelligent. In fact, well, we'll get back to Jefferson Davis later. So, as a last moment attempt to try and keep the United States together, John Crittenden, the guy on the left-hand side, his plan is to prevent the Civil War and bring back the Missouri Compromise. So basically, there still would be no slavery north of Missouri's southern border, but it would protect slavery in all states in the South, and also any states that would be added to the United States. And this would push a new, this was created to try and add Cuba to the United States or more states of Mexico. So basically more conquest and the addition of new slave states to kind of protect the fragile balance between slavery and anti-slavery in the United States. This does fail, and it was too little too late. The South had already seceded. Now, there's some major issues with the Civil War. Okay? So what do you do with national debt whenever you have, 11 states leaving the United States? Do you do it by population? Are they willing to accept it? Okay? And, Southerners would claim, we paid all these tariffs all this time, everything that was done to support Northern business. So at this point, you're on your own. You get to keep all the debt. United States. 2, fugitive slave issues. What happens if there's a runaway slave? Okay, so on the surface you would say, well, the North is against slavery, so if you see a runaway slave, you let them go, or you let them settle down in your area and start their lives over. But the problem is, you have some of the borderline states. You have Maryland, you have Delaware, you have Tennessee, okay, and you have Missouri, all states with slaves. And I'm sorry, it wasn't Tennessee, it was Kentucky. So take Tennessee off that list. Remember, they're on the other list, okay? But if you let all their slaves go, then they might decide that they want to join the Southern Alliance, and then you have that many more people to fight against, and the war becomes that much bloodier. Okay? Now, Europe wanted to have the United States break up into pieces because they thought that slavery threatened monarchies. Okay? Because if you have a country you can go to where everyone can choose what leader they have, eventually other countries are going to look at that and go, you know what, we want the same thing, and look at how well it's working there. So let's overthrow our king and queen, let's kill them or do whatever to them, and then we can reestablish a new government where we choose our leadership. Okay? Also, Europe could more easily defy the Monroe Doctrine, take back territories, and steal from the indigenous people of Latin America and South America, as the United States has really done over the last 200 years. So, that's our people to take advantage of. You leave them alone. So controversy continues. Okay? By the way, up until this point, just a lot of words. There's been no fighting, and everything done on paper. The papers can be ripped up. So Fort Sumter is in South Carolina. Lincoln is at an impasse. He's got to figure out what to do. Do they want to give up this fort? Okay, so the fort's running low on supplies. Do you send more troops to strengthen their position? Do you send more ammunition? Do you surrender the fort? What do you do? So what Lincoln does instead is he sends food. Okay, not a hostile act, just to feed the people in the fort. Okay, Jefferson Davis, though, orders an attack, and this is what starts the Civil War. The flag that was flying aboard Fort Sumter is taken back to New York, and it's been a little bit beaten and battered, and they put it up, and it inspires a lot of people to join the army. So, the first shots are fired. There aren't any casualties, but it's enough so that the Union will surrender this fort. So let's look at the two leaders. Okay, number one, Abraham Lincoln. His one and only goal was to preserve the Union, with slavery, without slavery, however he could do it. He did not want to be the president that killed the United States. Okay? So number one goal is to preserve the Union. Number two, he starts a blockade. So he shuts off all trade for the Confederacy. And remember, they don't really make anything in the South other than cotton. Now, maybe they could have made a wall, 50 feet high made out of cotton, so that if Northerners tried to cross, they'd fall into the cotton, they'd smother and die. But they did not do that. He raises the size of the army. He institutes a military draft. And since he is going to be the commander-in-chief and he does not really have any experience in warfare, he studies warfare to prepare for the war, checks out every book in the Library of Congress on war, and makes himself an expert. He also suspends habeas corpus, as we've talked about before. But once again, his only goal is to preserve the Union. I know I mentioned it earlier, but once again, his only goal was to preserve the Union. Now, Jefferson Davis, on the other hand, he's a much different cat. Okay? We're lucky for him, or we're lucky for the United States that Jefferson Davis and someone competent wasn't in charge of the Confederacy. Now, at the very top, he has very limited power because of the Confederate Constitution. Much like the Articles of Confederation, it has very limited power in the hands of the executive branch. He was elected for a 6-year term, and he ran unopposed. Once he set his mind to anything, he didn't change. And during the entire war, he expected at some point for Great Britain to step in because the South was producing almost all of their cotton. Now, the truth is, by the time the war hits, India starts producing cotton for Britain, as does Egypt, and so they don't really need American cotton as much. So, anyway, so that would be Jefferson Davis. So, along with on the bottom right hand side, there is the Confederate White House, which is nowhere near what the American White House is. Although I'm moving to the next slide because I don't have anything else to say. So, Union versus Confederacy. This is one of the things that I know that you hear about, but I don't know if you really think about. The fact that sometimes a river would be the difference between which side you fought on. Okay? So, many times people on either side would be fighting brothers. Fathers would be fighting sons, cousins. You had people fighting for that reason. Okay? And there were people in the Union that supported Confederates, and there were Confederates that supported people in the Union. And, while it's easy to label everyone that fought for the Confederacy as a racist jerk, the truth of the matter is this. If you live in the South and you have your family in the South before the war starts, and the war starts, and you've got your home and everyone else that you're responsible for in your house, you just can't abandon them. I mean, you might try and sell your house and move to the north, but are you really going to get money for your house? And if you move to the north, are they going to trust you or think that you're a spy? So it's not one of those things that's easy and as straightforward as everyone thinks. And the truth is that only one out of four families own slaves. So 75% of your families in the South don't own slaves. So are they really fighting to support the rich people? Or are they fighting just to protect their homes because someone else has started a war? And these are just some things for you to think of. I mean, because it's easy to just say that, well, everyone that was in the South was racist. And, there were racists in the North and the South. In fact, uh, the KKK, the modern KKK that started right around the time World War One ended, was formed in Indiana, and so a lot of northern states really, you know, were just as racist, if not more, than the South. You know. Well, anyway, I digress. So Robert E. Lee is asked by Lincoln to command Union troops. Okay, uh, but he's from Virginia, so he led the Confederacy. Now, Virginia, as you know, touches Washington, D.C., as does Maryland. And how close does Robert E. Lee live to Washington, D.C.? I give you a picture from the front door of Lee's house. Okay? How do I know that's from the front door of Lee's house? Because I took this photograph. Okay? I personally took it. And if you look in the background of the picture on the bottom left hand side, you will see the Washington Monument. You'll see the Capitol building over to the right. And you can even see the White House from there. So that's how close Lee lived to, uh, to Washington, D.C. and the North. Okay? So it is something that he had to think about heavily whenever he was making this decision. And he did own slaves, so it would seem like he would naturally support the North, but the truth is he didn't want either side to fight, but again, he was protecting his land. He will pay the price. His house is turned into the National Cemetery. And this leads us to the end of the day today. I hope everyone has a fantastic day. Don't AIDS, don't cocaine, don't COVID, and everyone stay safe. I'll see you on the other side. Happy trails.